A common question I get asked as a professional psychic is, how do you develop your intuition? Like, how do I start the spiritual practice? Is this even real? Am I crazy? Am I making this up? So this month inside the Elevated Life Club, we decided to cover that topic on developing your spiritual tools. And with that being said, we were thinking we should share some of this with the people on our podcast. So if you're not a part of the Elevated Life Club to access all the spiritual tools training that is going down this month, then stick around for this episode because we're going to leave you with one practical tip that's super easy to help you develop your intuition and start your spiritual practice. Hey, we're Britt and Chris Carmichael, and you're listening to the Elevated Life Podcast. Throughout the 13 years we've been together, we've never ceased in our endless quest to better ourselves.
We've studied top experts, philosophers, and gurus. After years of personal self-experimentation, we found the tools for shifting your beliefs, moving through fears, and developing a positive mindset.
If you're ready for a breakthrough, then you're in the right place because we're here to empower you to take control of your life with simple mindset shifts that create radical transformation.
We'll be diving into topics like personal growth, health, philosophy, spirituality, relationships, success, and mindfulness.
So create some space for yourself and get comfy. It's time to become the badass you were born to be. So this morning I pulled the Hermit Card while I was practicing my morning rituals. And if you are familiar with the tarot, you know that the Hermit is all about solitude and isolation. It's basically reaching a pinnacle on your path to spiritual enlightenment and knowing that every answer, all the clarity, all the wisdom that you are seeking can only be found within. It's basically like a return home for the soul, a remembering that you are that wise thing that you think you're looking for. And so I'm really sitting with this card and thinking how this applies in my life and how this is showing up. And this month in the Elevated Life Club, the topic is all about spiritual tools. And so Chris and I have been talking about that. And intuition is really one of those big pieces when it comes to your spiritual practice. So as I'm using my intuition to interpret the card and how it's showing up for me, I realized something that was so important is channeling. We are channels for spirit. We are creative expressions for this higher divine love to flow through us. And our job is to clear that channel. So really the topic today is about how can you use your power as a channel? What can you do to prime yourself, to develop your intuition so that you can co-create literally anything? Like such a beautiful gift when you have the awareness and you wake up to the fact that you are so powerful and that you are divine.
We've all done this. I think a lot of times when we talk about really cool spiritual things, sometimes we let verbiage and language get in the way because some people call it channeling, some people call it getting in the zone. Some people say, oh, I had this intuition, or oh, I had this insight, and
God told me.
They all kind of mean the same thing. We're all because we all come from different backgrounds. We come from different, we have different parents, and so our culture and how we were brought up typically gives us the language that we're using. So it's really important when we're talking about any spiritual practice, any spiritual tools, to just have an open mind.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah, and to make sure that, because this is the fun stuff. I mean, this stuff can really empower your life because it does start to make you a different person in your story. Because we're all telling ourselves a story. We can't help it. The mind does that. It does that for an identification purpose so that we can go out and act in the world. But it's important to realize that that's not you and that's a story that you're telling yourself. And so we want to start using language in a way that empowers us, not that it cuts us off from things that, maybe we just don't understand. Or maybe we haven't practiced enough. I hear people who are really big on thinking that meditation is something that's extremely mystical, and it's not. Something that's really simple. And what it does is starts to allow you to have control over your emotions. And so it's not so much the meditative practice that's the benefit. It's not. What's the benefit is that you start to have this more of a control. When you start to get angry, or when you start to get nervous, or when you start to get that afraid feeling, you can just be like, oh, it's going to come right back and be calm again. I have this calm center. That's the real me. And these emotions are things that are coming up from my mind to give me an awareness about something. So when we're talking about all this stuff, make sure in your mind you're letting it open. You're letting the doors just open. It doesn't mean that you accept anything, but it just means that you allow it to pass through and say, oh, I'm going to give that a try. I found out about channeling from Napoleon Hill. my entire background with the idea of channeling, or the idea of you receiving information and then sending that information out into the world, came from Napoleon Hill, who, if you have not read Think and Grow Rich, that should be the thing that you should be pausing and buying that book. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It's probably the best self-help book that's ever been written. Most of the stuff that you read now is just some sort of a copy of that. I mean, someone tried to modernize, and you can't improve on.
The truth is truth.
Yeah, what Napoleon Hill was doing. And so he's talking about using the brain as a receiving mechanism and also as a channeling mechanism to send those messages out. It's as though sometimes if you've had those flashes of insight, I know for me they happen normally one of two ways, big ways for me. That's on a walk. Walks will change your life if you're not taking walks out in nature. And if you can only be in a city, you got to get out. You got to be taking a break, scheduling a vacation, go somewhere. You don't have to camp, doesn't have to be hardcore unless you like that, but just go and be out in nature. You'll notice insight comes. Don't think about it. It's not you're going to go out in nature and contemplate and think and get out your whiteboard and dream up your ideas with a pen and paper and journal. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just being quiet in nature. And you'll notice a lot of times when you relax the thoughts a little bit, the dust settles and you see what's really going on.
So speaking of relax, I was asking Chris, like, before we do any of these podcasts, we set an intention of like, what are we trying to teach? What's the practical tool that they can take away and remember and practice on, developing their intuition? And so Chris and I were talking about it, and I was like, yeah, it's relaxing. The most effective things that have helped me to develop my intuition. Now there's all kinds of fun stuff, right? But the most effective is relaxing the mind through meditation. And I told Chris, well, that's like fucking boring. Like, that seems boring. Like, okay, well, you want to develop your intuition and like have all these cool spiritual gifts and like know how other people are thinking and feeling. And sometimes people are like, I don't really want to know that, but it is very helpful to discern as an empath if that's your energy or theirs, so that you can leave it when it's not yours. So we're talking about, how do you develop your intuition? So the answer is, well, you relax the mind. Well, how do you relax the mind? Through hypnosis or guided meditation work. And there's many other ways. I get great insight through sex. I get great insight through showers. I get great insight through taking walks in nature. We were talking about this morning. It's like all the heart chakra activated things. Like when you're in nature, there's a frequency of nature that activates your heart chakra. Same with sex, same with relaxing in the shower, opening yourself to channel, because water is a conduit. It's another channel. It's another source of information.
This is one of my favorite topics because it really allows you to start to be out of your own mind. What's super interesting is that when I have clients who are high achievers, who are people who are like doing really big things, and when I'm sitting there with them, just in the beginning, we just seen each other. I'm saying, hey, how's it going? They're, saying, hey, you're having a great week. That the formality kind of stuff, and then we get into the nitty gritty, and you can tell they've been overthinking. I mean, it's plain as day just by their body language. And so one of the first things I really like to do is I'm like, hey, come on a walk with me real quick, and they're like, wait, what are we doing? I'm like, we're going to go outside and we're going to let our feet hit the pavement or the grass, and we're going to walk around for a bit. And what's fascinating to watch about people is how quickly they'll just start to relax. They're back in play mode again, because we're not going to necessarily talk about business. We might talk about what's going on in personal life or relationships. We might. But what ends up happening is a different kind of conversation. And because you're so relaxed in that conversation, a lot of times the answer just reveals itself. And it's as though it's been obvious the whole time, but it's like you were thinking so hard that the thinking became the obstacle to it. So we are all very well geared to use our thinking mind. We've been developing it since we were children. Every kind of school we ever went to, they're all trying to get us to use our brain to do certain analytical tasks. And the problem is that on the spiritual ride, on the spiritual journey, you have to totally leave that behind. So it's going to be one of the hardest things that you have to overcome. The mind is the demon here. The mind is the one that's going to really choke us out of being able to notice our gifts. And it seems so counterintuitive, because you're like, well, if I'm smart or if I'm able to do these things, then this should be really easy for me. And a lot of times it's not, because the real path to intuition, the real path to any kind of spiritual, amazing things happening in your life is surrender.
I was going to say, if you don't say surrendering, then we're not on the same team.
So that's why there's a lot of entrances into the state that we're talking about. There's a lot of ways in here into this relaxed state. And you've been in this relaxed state before if you've ever danced, if you've ever kissed someone for a moment and time paused, if you've had those feelings before, that's exactly what we're talking about. But there are ways that you can do it on purpose. So it's not just happening to you in your life. And that's what we're talking about, being able to co-create. You start practicing and you start doing this stuff on purpose instead of just allowing it to happen to you. Spiritual experiences can spontaneously happen. And they often happen when a person has suffered enough. But just remember that that doesn't have to be you. You can start practicing these things before that ever starts to happen.
Or take psychedelics.
And you can start enjoying the gifts. Listen, I have a podcast coming out. Solo podcast. It's just going to be me talking with you. Solo podcast coming out later this month. If you're interested in these altered states, if you're interested in trance states, I'm going to have a podcast, just us, talking about sex, drugs, and altered states. So if you like this kind of topic, I'm going to wow you.
I mean, if you like this kind of topic, then you need to come hang out with us inside the Elevated Life Club, our monthly membership program where we teach these simple mindset shifts to create radical transformation in your life. Monthly yoga, live group coaching, meditation practices, all the tools that you need to up-level and expand in your personal development and your spiritual growth.
There's so much to be able to do with your mind. You have so many powers and so many gifts, but you have to, it's funny because we develop such a great talent and a great skill, and the mind is a wonderful thing. The same way we talk sometimes about the ego, you hear a lot of people bastardize the ego, and that's not it. It's just a part of us. And so what we have to do is we have to learn to live with that part, but maybe not let it run us. So if you've been letting your mind run you, what you're going to end up noticing is that you get stressed out quickly. You know, when you let the heart lead a little bit more, when you let the soul lead, as some people will use their language to call it, what will end up happening is that you notice that opportunities just tend to open up for you. What I like doing, and what the Elevated Life was even born out of, is the cross between the two. Because why not do both? BRIT's answer is always both. If you ever want to know what the answer is, if I'm like, hey, would you like to have this for dinner tonight, or you want to have this thing? BRIT's going to say, I want to get both. When we're standing there in the shopping, and Britta goes, hey, do you like this sweater or do you like this other kind of thing? It's both. It's always going to be both. So there's no reason not to intersect these two. There's no reason not to develop both of them.
Where are my Libras at? Do you feel me?
So if you've been on just the spiritual journey, you need to add in a little bit of the analytical stuff so you can balance out both sides, because we're having this human experience, but we're also wanting the spiritual as well. So you have to be putting in the two of them.
You know, that was a topic of conversation in my coaching call with one of my clients today. It was about, you know, how much time I spent in rigid diet and exercise routine, and I was like fitting into a size 4 and I fucking hated myself. And now I'm not that size and I love myself so much more, and I'm so much more relaxed because I take a balanced approach to my diet and nutrition. I stay consistent, I eat clean, I move my ass, but I fucking eat the cupcakes on the weekend when I want to. And that has like given me so much more, I don't know, freedom to be okay in the now and not always chasing some goal like when I'm 20 pounds lighter or when I hit this thing that I'm not now.
So the biggest spiritual goal, if there could be, remember, goals can't be in spirituality. That's something that only the mind does. This is like one of the most important things to get in your head. If you have a goal in your spirituality,
throw it out the window.
That's not spirituality. That's still more ego crap. It's like you're trying to be more spiritual than the next person. Like, I do my yoga
Stop
better
fooling
than
yourself.
you. Yeah, it's a joke. It's just one way for us to have bigger egos. And so you have to remember that if you want to let go of the mind, it's going to be surrender. What BRIT's talking about there is that if you want just achievement, you have to be absolutely rigid. If you want a specific goal, logical path to it, that's going to be the way. But if you're wanting to live a more open life, a life that you enjoy more, a life more full of happiness, more full of joy, because those things don't happen when they're attached to goals, those things only happen in the present moment. And so all that future stuff, while it's very good and really fantastic to do, especially because what that stuff is, it builds a belief in yourself that you can do something that you want to do. The only reason that you have goals is to remind yourself that when I want to do something, I can go do something. That's the power of the goal. It's not really the goal. It's not even the attainment of the goal. It's just you saying, hey, guess what? I can do it. So in the spiritual stuff, what you're going to have to start realizing is that a lot of it's letting go. That's where you're going to be vulnerable. That's where you're going to start finding that your relationships do better, especially the one with your significant other. If you're not being vulnerable in front of them, you're just being closed off emotionally, they're going to close off emotionally to you too. They're just going to mirror it back to you. And so when you start being vulnerable and start having the harder conversations, not that it's going to be easy, but at least you're both going to grow now. You're not going to be the same people in 10 years wondering where life went. You can start to say, hey, we grew together. That was tough. That was hard in some spots. That brought some conversations and some stuff that I hadn't dealt with. I didn't realize that. But then it brings in more intimacy. It brings more love into your life. You can't logic love. So you have to get into a space where you can begin to relax. It all comes back to relaxing.
You can't logic love. Okay, Chris Carmichael, with the wisdom, I feel like, there's so many different tools to help you to develop your intuition. We teach an infinite amount of ways inside the Elevated Life Club. So if you've been looking for a place and a community to plug into, to learn more, to grow more, and to not feel so alone in this crazy changing world, then one, come join us in the Elevated Life Club. But two, here's our practical advice.
Let me tell them.
What?
You got it.
How about we both?
Okay, go for it.
Great, both. Get quiet. Get quiet with yourself. If that means sitting in meditation, even though it's hard, if that means going alone on a walk in nature and not being distracted by your phone or other people, if that means getting in a hot Epsom salt bath and locking out the kids or whatever you got to do, spending time in silence makes room for your soul to speak. So my advice is to slow down. As much as we want to achieve and hit our goals and do the things, we forget that fulfillment is the true essence of this life. Finding fulfillment along the journey is what's going to give you that success that you're seeking on the other side of those goals.
Dang. All right, I'm going to give you a quick practical tool. If you're like, I love what BRIT said, but I want to know the exact thing to be able to do, here's what I want you to do to start off this process. Remember, this is just a starting ground. Get good here first. Don't even think about doing the other steps. Just start here and do this for a little while, and I promise you're going to start seeing really, really big changes in your life. I just want you to pick out some sort of spot on the wall in front of you that's pretty much eye level or maybe even a little bit higher than that. And I just want you to look at that spot and take a few deep breaths. After you've taken a few deep breaths, what you'll notice is that it's difficult to focus on the spot. The second that you feel your gaze soften, where the spot's not perfectly in focus anymore, that's the moment where you can just go ahead and close your eyes and just close them on the exhale. Set a timer before you do this whole process. Just set like a 4 or 5 minute timer. Don't do this for forever. Just a 4 or 5 minute timer. All I want you to do is stare at that spot. When your eyes soften, exhale, close your eyes down, and just wait till the timer comes off and just sit in that spot. You don't have to think about anything. You don't have to imagine anything. This isn't anything with an extra process. All you're doing is relaxing your vision, relaxing your breathing a little bit, and you're closing your eyes down and just sitting.
I totally do that when I'm taking my Epsom salt baths. I light a candle and I just gaze into the candle until I find that my mind starts to relax and it's not wandering. And that's when I totally close my eyes and just let the magic happen.
So that's the beginning spot. All you have to do is start right there. And I promise there will be huge changes. If you practice that once or twice a day, and I'm telling you, in a week, 2 weeks, you're going to be like, why am I relaxing so much more? It's because what you're doing is you're teaching your brain to go into relaxation mode. You're constantly pressing reset. Like, you ever have your phone and it's not working anymore? You're like, I just bought a brand new phone. How's this not working? You got to turn it off, turn it back on for a minute. We do that naturally every night at sleep, but for a lot of us, our sleep's not optimized. The whole night plan's not optimized. We're not doing it right. We're not doing it long enough. We're not getting the restful sleep that we need. We're spending too much time.
We have a bundle for that.
We got a bundle for all of it. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to pause during your day. It's not enough for nighttime. You're going to have to pause during your day. You have to take a break. I mean, the people who are really going to get this are going to do this every hour. But I know that's asking a lot. That's for the overachievers. But if you want to overachieve this, that's the moment. Just do this once a day. And you'll find that after a couple of weeks, you'll start to relax. You'll start to notice that your intuition fires off and you begin to hear it, whereas your thoughts were too noisy before.
I was just going to say, you have to think of your mind and intuition as a radio. You're so used to listening to the station of your mind that it's almost impossible to listen to your intuition. The only way to change the channel is to actually turn off the one you're listening to. So if your mind is rattling thoughts that don't feel good or aren't in alignment with where you want to go, then this is the time to start practicing gaining that focus focus and control over your thinking so that you can direct your thoughts in a way that you want.
The last thing I want to leave you with is this. Is that when you start doing this, you're going to feel like this is really boring. I cannot believe this is boring. And that is
so boring.
That is absolutely the point. The part of your mind that can get bored, that needs to be entertained every 5 seconds, is the part of your mind we want to quiet off into the corner.
That's keeping you trapped from accessing deeper states of consciousness.
And so we're going to move that aside by boring it. And that's the idea of this, is that when your focus loses gaze, you're just beginning to bore yourself. And then once you take away that visual plane that you normally stare at all the time and make images on and judge and criticize and contemplate about, once that's gone, your mind's bored enough. And so this will allow you to sleep better at night. This will allow you to perform better during the day. This will allow you to feel more relaxed. This will allow you to feel less stressed, less worried. This little technique is going to be the building block. If you want to build onto this hardcore, if you're like, yeah, but I want the spiritual tools. Like, I want to be doing this stuff. I love it.
I want to channel people.
I'm interested in this.
I want to be telepathic.
I want to get my body right.
Manifest more money.
There's all this mind, spiritual, all of this overlaps. So as you increase one of them, they all start to increase together because it's a synergistic effect. The human's meant to be in balance. And once we get out of balance, something goes wrong in our lives. And you felt this before. When we have great sadness or great guilt, there's some sort of out of balance thing. And so if you want to learn how to do this stuff, we're going to be teaching this all month long in our membership club. And this is a fantastic topic to start to dive into so that you can begin to really embrace your natural gifts. There are some things that you can do that you probably are not practicing on a regular basis, or at least not tuning your life into. We build our entire life around this. I mean, this stuff has become so important to us that our life is not involved around just work or just one. We do this part first, and then everything else comes into a second and third.
So as boring as it may sound, the entryway to spirituality is relaxation. Prioritize your peace and try out that technique. And if you are looking for more tips and inspiration, come join us in the club. And until then, we'll catch you next week. Peace. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Elevated Life podcast. Want more? Join us at theelevatedlifeclub.com for mindset upgrades, lifestyle hacks, and spiritual tools to elevate your soul.
Each month features a new masterclass, meditation, yoga practice, and more to help you transform your life one step at a time.
Come join the 7 or Above Club.